All right, so are we recording? Yeah. All right. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, YouTubers. Going to be reading The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis, Clive Staples Lewis. So I'm going to go see how far I can get in this chapter. Chapter 1, Behind the Gym. It was a dull autumn day, and Jill Pole was crying behind the gym. She was crying because they had been bullying her. This is not going to be a school story, so I shall say as little as possible about Jill's school, which is not a pleasant subject. It was coeducational, air quote, a school for both boys and girls, what used to be called a mixed school. Some said it was not nearly so mixed as the minds of the people who ran it. These people had the idea that boys and girls should be allowed to do what they liked. And unfortunately, what 10 or 15 of the biggest boys and girls liked best was bullying the others. All sorts of things, horrid things, went on, which at an ordinary school would have been found out and stopped in half a term. But at this school they weren't. Or even if they were, the people who did them were not expelled or punished. The head said they were interesting psychological cases and sent for them and talked to them for hours. And if you knew the right sorts of things to say to the head, the main result was that you became rather a favorite rather than otherwise. Have to get some water. That was why Jill Pole was crying on that dull autumn day on the damp little path which runs between the back of the gym and the shrubbery. And she hadn't nearly finished her cry when a boy came round the corner of the gym whistling, with his hands in his pockets. He nearly ran into her. "Can't you look where you're going?" said Jill Pole. "All right," said the boy. "You needn't start." And then he noticed her face. "I say, Pole, what's up?" Jill only made faces the sort you make when you're trying to say something, but find that if you speak, you'll start crying again. "It's them, I suppose, as usual," said the boy grimly, digging his hands further into his pockets. Jill nodded. There was no need for her to say anything else. Even if she could have said it, they both knew. "Now look here," said the boy, "there's no good at all, us all." He meant well, but he did rather talk like someone beginning a lecture. Jill suddenly flew into a temper, which is quite a likely thing to happen if you've been interrupted in a cry. "Oh, go away and mind your own business," she said. "Nobody asked you to come barging in, did they? And you're a nice person to start telling us what we all have to do, aren't you? I suppose you mean we have to spend all our time sucking up to them and currying favor and dancing attendance to them like you do." "Oh, Lord," said the boy, sitting down on the grassy bank at the edge of the shrubbery and very quickly getting up again because the grass was soaking wet. His name, unfortunately, was Eustace Scrubb, but he wasn't a bad sort. "Pole," he said, "is that fair? Have I been doing anything of that sort this term? Didn't I stand up to them? Didn't I stand up to Carter about the rabbit? And didn't I keep secret about the Spivens under torture too? And didn't I?" I don't know, and I don't care," sobbed Jill. Scrub saw that she wasn't quite herself yet, and so very sensibly he offered her peppermint, and he had one too. Presently Jill began to see things in a clearer light. Need to get a remote. "I'm sorry, Scrub," she said presently. "I wasn't fair. You have done all that this term." "Then wash out last term if you can," said Eustace. "I was a different chap then. Gosh, what a little tick I was." "Well, honestly, you were," said Jill. "You think there's been a change then?" said Eustace. "It's not only me," said Jill. "Everyone's been saying so. They've noticed it too. Eleanor Blackiston heard Adela Pennyfeather talking about it in our changing room yesterday. She said, 'Someone's got to get hold of that Scrub kid. He's quite unmanageable this term. We shall have to attend to him next.'" Eustace gave a shudder. Everyone at Experiment House knew what it was like being attended to by them. Both children were quiet for a moment, the drops dripping off the laurel leaves. "Why were you so different last term?" said Jill presently. "A lot of queer things happened to me in the holidays," said Eustace mysteriously. "What sorts of things?" asked Jill. Eustace didn't say anything for quite a long time. Eustace didn't say anything for quite a long time. Then he said, "Look here, Pole. You and I hate this place about as much as anyone can hate anything, don't we?" "I know I do," said Jill. "Then I really think I can trust you." "Damn good of you," said Jill. "Yes, but this is a really terrific secret. Pole, I say, Are you good? Are you good at believing things? I mean, things that everyone else would laugh at. Everyone here would laugh at. I've never had the chance, said Jill, but I think I would be. Could you believe me if I said I'd been right out of the world, outside this world last holidays? I wouldn't know what you meant. Well, don't let's bother about worlds then. Supposing I told you that I'd been to a place, told you that I'd been in a place where animals can talk, and where there are enchantments and dragons and, well, all sorts of things you would have in fairy tales. Scrub felt terribly awkward as he said this and got red in the face. How did you get there, said Jill. She also felt curiously shy. The only way you can, by magic, said Eustace, almost in a whisper. I was with 2 cousins of mine. We were just whisked away. They'd been there before. Now that they were talking in whispers, Jill somehow felt it easier to believe. Then suddenly a horrible suspicion came over her, and she said so fiercely that for a moment she looked like a tigress. If I find you've been pulling my leg, I'll never speak to you again. Never, never, never. I'm not, said Eustace. I swear I'm not. I swear by everything. Now, when I was at school, one would have said, I swear by the Bible, but Bibles are not encouraged at Experiment House. All right, said Jill, I'll believe you. And tell nobody? What do you take me for? They were very excited as they said this. But when they had said it, Jill looked around and saw the dull autumn sky and heard the drip off the leaves and thought of all the hopelessness of Experiment House. It was a 13-week term and there were still 11 weeks more to come, she said. But after all, what's the good? We're not there, we're here, and we jolly well can't get there, or can we? That's what I've been wondering, said Eustace. When we came back from that place, someone said that the 2 Pevensey kids, they're my 2 cousins, could never go back again. It was their 3rd time, you see. I suppose they had their share, but he never said I couldn't. Surely he would have said so, unless he meant that I was to get back there. And I can't help wondering, can we? Could we? Do you mean do something to make it happen? Eustace nodded. You mean we might draw a circle on the ground and write in queer letters in it and stand inside it and recite charms and spells? Well, said Eustace after that he had thought about it a bit, I believe that was the sort of thing I was thinking of, though I never did it. But now that it comes to the point, I have an idea that all those circles and things are rather rot. I don't think he'd like them. He'd like them. It would look as if we thought we could make him do things, but really we can only ask him. Who is this person you keep talking about? They call him Aslan in that place, said Eustace. What a curious name. Not half so curious as himself, Eustace said solemnly, but let's get on. It can't do any harm just asking. Let's stand side by side like this, and we'll hold our arms out in front of us like they did with the palms down, like they did in Ramondu's island. Whose island? I'll tell you about that another time, and he might like us to face east. Let's see, which way is east? I don't know, said Jill. It's an extraordinary thing about girls that they never know the points of a compass, said Eustace. You don't know either, said Jill indignantly. Yes, I do, if only you would stop interrupting. I've got it now. He's facing up into the laurels. Now, will you say the words after me? What words? Said Jill. The words I'm going to say, of course, answered Eustace. Now. And he began, Aslan, Aslan, Aslan. And Jill repeated, Aslan, Aslan, Aslan. Please let us 2 go into. At that moment, a voice from the other side of the gym was heard shouting, Pole? Yes, I know where she is. She's blubbering behind the gym. Shall I fetch her out? Jill and Eustace gave one glance at each other, dived under the laurels, and began scrambling up the steep, earthy slope of the shrubbery at a speed which did them great credit. Owing to the curious methods of teaching at Experiment House, one did not learn much French or maths or Latin or that sort of thing, but one did learn a lot about getting away quickly and quietly when they were looking for one. After about a minute of scramble, they stopped to listen and knew by the noises that they heard that they were being followed. If only the door was open again, said Scrub as they went on, and Jill nodded. For at the top of the shrubbery was a high stone wall in that wall a door by which you could get out into the open moor. This door was nearly always locked, but there had been times when people had found it open, or perhaps there had only been one time. But you can imagine how the memory of even one time kept people hoping and trying the door. For if it should happen to be unlocked, it would be a splendid way of getting outside the school grounds without being seen. Jill and Eustace, now both very hot and very grubby from going almost bent double under the laurels, panted up to the wall. and there was the door shut as usual. "It's sure to be no good," said Eustace with his hand on the handle, and then, "Oh, by gum!" For the handle turned and the door opened. A moment before, both of them had meant to just get through the doorway double quick time, but by chance the door if by any chance the door was unlocked. But now when the door was actually open, they both stood stock still, for what they saw was quite different from what they had expected. They had expected to see the gray, heathery slope of the moor going up and up to join the dull autumn sky, but instead a blaze of sunshine met them. It poured through the doorway like the light of a June day pours into a garage when you open the door. It made the drops of water on the grass glitter like beads and show up the dirtiness of Jill's tear-stained face. And the sunlight was coming from what certainly did look like a different world. What they could see of it, they saw smooth turf, smoother and brighter than Jill had ever seen before, and blue sky, and darting to and fro things so bright that they might have been jewels or huge butterflies. Although she had been longing for something like this, Jill felt frightened. She looked at Scrubb's face and saw that he was frightened too. "Come on, Polly," he said in a breathless voice. "Can we get back?" "Is it safe?" asked Jill. At that moment a voice shouted from behind, a mean, spiteful little voice. "Now then, Pole," it squeaked. "Everyone knows you're there. Down you come." It was the voice of Edith Jackal. Not one of them herself, but one of their hangers-on and tale-bearers. "Quick," said Scrubb. "Here, hold hands. We mustn't get separated." And before she knew what was happening, he had grabbed her hand and pulled her through the door, out of the school grounds, out of England, out of her whole world, and into that place. The sound of Edith Jackal's voice stopped as suddenly as the voice of the radio had when it was switched off. Instantly there was quite a different sound all about them. It came from those bright things overhead, which now turned out to be birds. They were making a riotous noise, but it was much more like music, rather advanced music, which you don't quite take in the first hearing, than bird songs ever are in our world. And in spite of the singing, there was a sort of background of immense silence. That silence, combined with the freshness of the air, made Jill think they must be on the top of a very, very high mountain. Still had her by the hand. Scrubb still had her by the hand, and they were walking forward, staring about them on every side. Jill saw that huge trees, rather like cedars but bigger, grew in every direction, but as they did not grow close together, and as there was no undergrowth, this did not prevent them from seeing a long ways into the forest, left and right. And as far as Jill's eyes could reach, it was all the same: level turf, darting birds with yellow or dragonfly blue or rainbow plumage, blue shadows, and emptiness. There was not a breath of wind in that cool, bright air. It was a very lonely forest. Right ahead there were no trees, only blue sky. Right ahead there were no trees, only blue sky. They went straight on without speaking, till suddenly Jill heard Scrubb say, "Look out," and felt herself being jerked back. They were at the very edge of a cliff. Jill was one of those lucky people who have a good head for heights. She didn't mind in the least standing on the edge of a precipice. She was rather annoyed with Scrubb for pulling her back, just as if I was a kid, she said, and she wrenched her hand out of his. When she saw how very white he had turned, she despised him. "What's the matter?" she said, and to show that she was not afraid, she stood very near the edge indeed. In fact, a good deal nearer than even she liked. Then she looked down. She now realized that Scrubb had some excuse for looking white, for no cliff in our world is to be compared with this. Imagine yourself at the top of the very highest cliff you could know, and imagine yourself looking down to the very bottom. And then imagine that the precipice goes on below that, as far again, 10 times as far, 20 times as far. And when we look down all that distance, you imagine what little white things that might at first glance be mistaken for sheep. But presently you realize that they are clouds, not little wreaths, but mist, but the enormous white puffy clouds which are themselves as big as most mountains. And at last, in between those clouds, you get your first glimpse of the real bottom, so far away that you can't make out whether it's field or wood, or land or water, farther below the clouds than you are above them. Farther below those clouds than you are above them. Jill stared at it. Then she thought that perhaps after all she would take a step back or so from the edge, but she didn't like to for fear of what Scrubb would think. Then she suddenly decided she didn't care what he thought, and she would jolly well get away from that horrible edge and never laugh at anyone again for not liking heights. Again. But when she tried to move, she found she couldn't. Her legs seemed to be turned into putty. Everything was swimming before her eyes. "What are you doing, Pole? Come back, blithering little idiot." shouted Scrub, but his voice seemed to be coming from a long ways off. She felt him grabbing at her, but by now she had no control over her own arms or legs. There was a moment's struggling on the cliff edge. Jill was too frightened and dizzy to know quite what she was doing. But two things she remembered as long as she lived. They often came back to her in dreams. One was that she had wrenched herself free of Scrub's clutches. The other was that at that same moment, Scrub himself, with a terrified scream, had lost his balance and had gone hurtling to the depths. Fortunately, she was given no time to think over what she had done. Some huge, brightly colored animal had rushed to the edge of the cliff. It was lying down, leaning over, and this was the odd thing, blowing. Not roaring or snorting, just blowing from its wide open mouth. Blowing out as steadily as a vacuum cleaner sucks in. Jill was lying so close to the creature that she could feel the breaths vibrating steadily through its body. She was lying still because she couldn't get up. She was nearly fainting. Indeed, she wished she really could faint, but faints don't come for the asking. At last she saw far away below her a tiny black speck floating away from the cliff and slightly upwards. As it rose, it also got further away. By the time it was nearly on a level with the cliff, it was so far off that she lost sight of it. It was obviously moving from them at a great speed. Jill couldn't help thinking that the creature at her side was blowing it away. She turned and looked at the creature. It was a lion. Chapter 1. I made it through a whole chapter. Wow. All right. Look at what page I started on. I started on page 9. About 10 pages. So, all right. Well, good night. I'm gonna try to stay in it every night. Or do a video every night. They won't be live probably, most of them, because that takes some more time to set it up. All right. Good night. Love y'all. Thank you.